Joe Biden is giving us whiplash because you can give him credit for proposing something fairly progressive and listening to people on his team now, his advisory boards like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez or Varshini Prakash of the Sunrise Movement. But then he goes on local TV and says conservative things and just burns the goodwill that he has with the progressive community or is trying to accumulate. So on Tuesday, anchor Jamie Bowl of North Carolina's WBTV asked Biden about recent ads that the Trump campaign has been running. The president's campaign is running an ad here in North Carolina. It essentially says if you win, crime calls will go unanswered because you support defunding the police, Bowl said, and asked, where do you stand on that issue? That has never been my position. It is not my position now, Biden said. Where I stand on it is police have to clean up their act. The only thing that will happen if police don't meet standards is they'll lose some federal funding. In another interview with Arizona's KPNX, Biden brought up the issue unprompted. Asked how his thinking on policing has changed since the 1994 crime bill, Biden said, well, it hasn't changed a whole lot in the sense that I don't think we should be defunding police departments. I think we should be holding police departments responsible by doing what? Because one way to hold them responsible would be to take away their military toys and all of the excess funding that they use to crack down on Black and brown people specifically in this country.
All right, there's two very disturbing things in there. One is talking about increasing funding for the police. Look, I get that defunding the police is a tough slogan for a presidential candidate to get behind. I had issues with it in the beginning as a slogan, and they want to get Trump out of office. They want to be safe. I understand that, right? And so some of you might say, no, I want Biden or any Democratic candidate to say defund the police. They're not going to say that. The vice presidential candidate, when that's announced, when that person is announced, also will not say it. But that's one thing. It's another thing to say, no, I want to increase their funding. Under the auspices and the guise of I'll bring in some psychologists and stuff like that. Well, okay, then you're saying you're not really going to change anything. They're like, oh, they should be nicer. That's not a thing. You can't enforce they should be nicer. That just means I'm not really gonna do anything about it. And I'll probably, under the pressure of the police union, even funnel them more money. Okay, so that's Biden, he's the one saying it. And then the second part is him talking about, 94 crime bill, I haven't changed much at all. Yeah, the 94 crime bill is the one that locked up millions of fellow Americans under total garbage reasoning. We talked about on the show a couple of days ago. They locked up millions of people for just marijuana possession, took away their freedom and ruined their lives and their ability to get a job afterwards, took away years of their liberty and largely targeted minorities. And after all these years, some folks who signed on the 94 crime bill have profusely apologized and said it led to re-incarceration of Black people in this country, to the point where at one point Black males in prison were more than Black males during slavery. So it was just an abomination. And Biden thinks, yeah, rock and roll, I still like it. Well, he was one of the principal authors of it. So he hasn't changed. He's a conservative. He's always been conservative. So the election is between a right winger and a monster. So maybe Biden's not a monster, but he's definitely a right winger.
I think there's this real phenomenon with him, and I noticed it in the primary, where when he feels he's being criticized, he doubles, triples down. I mean, Cenk, you saw, it still sticks out in my mind when Elizabeth Warren was talking about the CFPB and he just lashes out at her and goes, I got you those votes, and screams in her face, which was entirely counterfactual and didn't make sense. He's extremely touchy when he thinks he's being criticized, even when he was just trying to tee up his old position there. Or the reporter was just teeing him up to answer a question, and he just doubles, triples down. It's kind of Trumpian in that way. But the flip side of it is that when he has people in the room that he can talk to, he can be empathetic when it's not in public and things like that in media interviews, because you're seeing the things that he's proposing that could all be BS. I have no idea, but they are way more progressive, and someone like Bernie Sanders seems to have faith in him. So presumptive Democratic presidential nominee Joe Biden on Tuesday outlined an updated climate plan seeking to invest $2 trillion to boost clean energy and rebuild infrastructure. The proposal is the second plank of his new economic agenda called Build Back Better, which he first detailed last week in Pennsylvania. Biden's Build Back Better plan is not a tongue twister, but an aggressive economic recovery proposal to lift the United States out of its pandemic-induced depression. If enacted, it would be the biggest federal investment in American manufacturing since World War II, the heaviest hand in government job creation since the Great Depression. Biden's climate initiative calls to chart the United States on an irreversible path to net zero carbon emissions by 2050, which is way too late. But to do that, the plan would aim to achieve a carbon pollution-free power sector by 2035. It would also upgrade 4 million buildings and weatherize 2 million homes over 4 years to increase energy efficiency. And the proposal, Biden's campaign said, would seek to shift major cities toward public transportation and create millions of good union jobs, rebuilding America's crumbling infrastructure. So that did include elements of the Green New Deal there, creating jobs while building clean energy infrastructure, which is going to be especially important in order to recover from the economic hole that Republicans and corporate Democrats are putting us in the middle of this pandemic, with giveaways to corporations, to wealthy people. I mean, Kudlow and Trump are trying to do a capital gains tax cut right now, which only helps wealthy people. So Biden does understand the urgency of the moment in that sense, and he is listening to progressives. But when you challenge him on himself personally in his old positions, I'm kind of psychoanalyzing him here, but I think I'm onto something. He gets so defensive and he triples down. I mean, there's no way to defend the crime bill. And then the neoliberal fantasy of, if we just give cops more money, then they'll be nicer because then they'll have more money and they'll appreciate us and they'll have more resources. That's lunacy as well. That's just a dumb position.
Yeah, so Emma, I think your psychological analysis is pretty good, especially on the empathy count. I think Joe Biden has empathy for anyone who's in the room. I think it's genuine. The problem is he spends almost all of his time in rooms filled with millionaire donors. So he has tremendous empathy for them. And that's why I think the task force is important. I know it's much derided by a lot of people, but there are real progressives on that task force. And it forces Biden and his team to be in a room with them and perhaps just against all odds, listen to them. And in this case, they did. And when they did on the environmental and the infrastructure issues, what progressives say is so logical that it'd be madness to do otherwise. So why do I say that? Because the $2 trillion that they're going to spend to rebuild the energy infrastructure of this country, what does it do? One, it makes progressives very happy because it goes towards Green New Deal and rebuilding energy infrastructure and saving the planet, and it's absolutely necessary. Two, it creates a ton of new jobs when we need a ton of new jobs. People are trying to figure out a way to wrap their head around how can we create millions of jobs? Well, this makes so much sense. Everybody gets it. Oh, I get it. Like Eisenhower built the highways, Biden is going to build the energy infrastructure, and he's going to need a lot of people to do it. And the third thing that it checks off, as you saw in that statement, is the unions. So that's a huge constituency for the Democratic Party, and he's saying, don't worry, they're going to be good union jobs. So everybody's going, yes. See, we told you progressives have practical ideas that are both politically popular and practical to do. So he takes one of those ideas and runs with it. Fantastic. So look, we do nuance on this show. So when he's wrong about the crime bill and when he's wrong about the police, we call him out, and yes, and sometimes in harsh terms. And when he's right about the environment, energy, and infrastructure, we're thrilled to have him be right and give him credit for that. Now, of course, the last thing is he actually going to do it? Is all the reason in the world to do it? But one of the lobbyists at the end of one of these articles talking about it has said, we'll see, he's campaigning. But if he wins, we'll get in there and we'll get him to change his mind.
Yeah, well, that's so really quickly, why I think it is a really fascinating dichotomy between Hillary Clinton, who was, I think, more to the left politically than Joe Biden, but more vitriolically against progressives and activists on the left, is that it's so key who would be in Biden's team, because it's for the exact phenomenon we're discussing, Cenk. If you have some people in the room, maybe he can legislate in a more progressive way.
Yeah, well, then I gotta say it. If Elizabeth Warren's in the room, he's gonna be much tougher on banks at a minimum. If Kamala Harris is in the room, she's gonna be like, yeah, what are we doing for the donors? So that's gonna make a giant difference. It just is.
Thanks for watching the Young Turks. Really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.